Most people like saving money when they can, and this is especially true when it comes to skateboarders. The thing is, in skateboarding, you tend to get what you pay for. If you buy a cheap deck, it's probably going to break. If you buy cheap shoes, they're probably going to rip. The good news is, there's a few things you can save money on in skateboarding without sacrificing quality too much. In this video, we're going to go over 10 cheap skateboarding alternatives. Links to everything will be in the description, but a lot of the things mentioned are items you probably already have laying around your house. If you have any tips of your own, go ahead and share them in the comments to help other people out. Do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Check out the links in the description. And with that said, let's get right into it. Now, before going too far, I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. A lot of skaters consider starting their own company, but the thought of having to build a website is a little intimidating. With Squarespace, they make building a website as straightforward as possible. There's tons of drag and drop templates that are simple to set up and customize, and they're constantly releasing more. They make it super easy to create pro-level videos, set up and display a portfolio, or even start an online store. Not that long ago, if you wanted to build a website, you used to have to know how to code or be some tech-savvy person, but Squarespace makes building a website accessible to everyone. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/skatebox to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. To start things off, we have building a ramp versus buying a ramp. A lot of skaters think the only way to get a solid ramp to skate is if they buy one, but that's really not the case. Building a ramp is virtually always cheaper than buying one pre-built, and it's honestly not that hard to do. Even if you aren't the best at building things, there's plenty of free ramp plans online, and it's really not that hard to figure out. It does help if you have a friend or family member that's good with tools, but even if you don't, you can most likely do it yourself. Some pre-built ramps are pretty solid, and if you can afford one, they can definitely be worth it, but if you want to save some money, you should try building one instead. The second thing on the list is making custom grip tape. A lot of skaters like having graphics on their grip tape. The problem is, grip tape with graphics on it can cost $20 to $30, or sometimes even more. This means if you buy 2 to 3 sheets of grip tape with graphics on them, it costs just as much as a new board. To save some money, it's much cheaper to buy some black grip tape and customize it yourself. On average, you can get a single sheet of grip tape for around $5, and there's plenty of things you can do to customize it. You can use paint markers, you can cut out your own stencil and spray paint it, or you can even just cut it up into different shapes. Regardless of what method you use, making your own grip tape art can be a lot of fun, and it's almost always cheaper than buying grip tape with a graphic on it. The third cheap skateboarding alternative is making your own balance board. They might not be the most popular, but there are a decent amount of skaters out there who like to use balance boards. They're fun to mess around on, and they can help you get better at balancing, which in turn is supposed to help with your skating. Now, unfortunately, balance boards can easily cost a few $100s, which really isn't practical for most skaters. Instead, a much better alternative is to make your own using an old deck and a 2-liter bottle. There's also people who make more professional ones using PVC pipe, but it really comes down to personal preference. There's a few good videos out there showing you how to do it, and if you want to try out a balance board but don't want to spend a ton of money, making your own is a great option. For number 4, we have covering cracks with a metal ruler instead of sheet metal. Using sheet metal to cover cracks at a skate spot is a fairly well-known hack.
If it wasn't for this thing at certain spots, I mean, you wouldn't even be able to get the clip.
It's a great way to make spots easier to skate, but thanks to inflation, sheet metal has gotten pretty expensive. Using a ruler to cover a crack at a skate spot works almost as well as sheet metal, and it's a much cheaper option. Not only that, but rulers are a lot more portable as well. You can easily toss it into your bag and skate around, and you'll barely even know it's there. Since a piece of sheet metal can cost $40 to $50 depending on the size, and a pack of metal rulers is only around $5, they're a pretty solid alternative if you want to save some money. The fifth cheap skateboarding alternative is using sanding belt cleaner instead of grip gum. Depending on the spots you skate, sometimes your grip tape can get a little dirty. Unless you enjoy skating around with dirty grip tape, using some grip gum has pretty much been the standard for most people. Now, even though grip gum does work well, what a lot of skaters don't realize is that sanding belt cleaner is essentially the same exact thing. The only difference is, grip gum is a lot more expensive. When you actually compare the two, a stick of grip tape cleaner usually costs more than a stick of sanding belt cleaner, but it's typically half the size. Keep in mind, both options are pretty cheap, so you're not saving a ton of money, but since they're virtually the same thing, you might as well go with the cheaper option. So next up, we have making a spare parts kit instead of buying one. There's a few skate companies out there that make spare parts kits, which can actually come in handy. They come with things like bushings, hardware, and bearings, but the actual contents vary depending on who makes them. Now, generally speaking, spare parts kits are usually a pretty decent deal. The thing is, you can normally make your own for a lot cheaper. If you get an old toolbox or tackle box, you can slowly start to add spare parts to it whenever you get new gear, and eventually fill it up over time. Obviously, this isn't as good as having brand new spare parts ready to go, but it's a good way to make use out of old skateboard parts that you probably don't use anymore. Not only that, but when you make your own kit, you can customize it to suit your own needs. So, for example, some people might need bearings more, and other people might need hardware more. When you build your own kit, you get to add exactly what you want to it, and it's usually cheaper than buying one that's pre-made. Moving on, we have making your own cruiser board. Cruiser boards can be a ton of fun, and they can really come in handy when you need to film, or even just skate down a rough street. Instead of spending a ton of money buying a brand new cruiser setup, it's not that hard to make your own instead. Most people have extra parts laying around that they can piece together a board with, and even if you don't, your friends probably do. If you're really determined, you can even take things a step further and use an old deck to cut out your own custom shape. It does take a little extra work, but it allows you to get creative and it'll give your board some personality. Even if a custom-built cruiser isn't quite as polished as a store-bought one, it costs a lot less money and it works almost as well. Next up, we have buying generic skate wax. Unless you happen to really like the look of name brand skate wax, you're much better off buying golf wax instead. Skate wax normally comes in a variety of cool looking shapes and colors, which does make them more visually appealing, but it tends to drive up the cost. Since golf wax is just generic looking wax that comes in simple little bars, it's a much cheaper option. I'm sure every skater has also heard about using deodorant or soap as wax, but to be honest, those should really be a last resort. Sometimes soaps can be crumbly and they don't work that well, and deodorant simply doesn't last that long. In my experience, golf wax is the most similar to name brand skate wax, and it's probably the best alternative out there.
Gotta have wax, man. Gotta have wax ready every session.
The next tip on the list is getting a cheap guitar stand instead of a skateboard rack. If you live in a house with multiple skaters, or if you just have more than one board, it can be nice to have a place to keep your boards organized. There are some decent quality skateboard racks out there that you can buy, but the problem is, a lot of them are a little on the expensive side. Now, there is the option to build your own, which will likely save you money, but recently I saw someone using an old guitar rack instead, and it works surprisingly well. There's tons of different types of guitar racks out there, and most of them are cheaper than any skate rack you'll find. Aside from that, guitar racks tend to look a little nicer too. It might sound like a bit of an odd way to save money, but once you compare the price of a guitar rack to the price of a skateboard rack, it starts to make a lot of sense. So next up, we have using tennis balls instead of skate trainers. When people are first learning how to skate, they often have trouble practicing flat ground because their board keeps moving. To solve this problem, a few companies started making skate trainers, which basically stop your wheels from rolling. Now, to be honest, if you can't stand on a board comfortably without it moving, you probably don't need to be worrying about learning flat ground tricks yet. With that said, some skaters still like to go directly to learning tricks when they first start out, and a lot of people feel like skate trainers help. The price can vary depending on which ones you go with, but generally speaking, skate trainers cost around $20 to $30. To save some money, it's much cheaper to find some old tennis balls and cut holes in them, and it essentially does the same thing. You are more likely to roll around a little, but having some wiggle room can actually help you when you're first starting out. Again, if you're a beginner, you're probably better off getting comfortable standing and riding around on a board before you start learning flat ground, but if you've got your mind set on it and you want to save some money, try using some tennis balls instead of skate trainers. For the most part, it's usually worth it to pay a little bit more for some better quality stuff. This isn't always the case though, and if you get creative, there's a ton of ways to save money without sacrificing quality. If you have any tips of your own, go ahead and share them in the comments. Do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Check out the links in the description. And with that said, thanks for watching.